Holiday letdowns are real, both home and on the court. We've got to pull ourselves out of a bit of a funk, and we've got to get ready because we do not have time to waste. It is Monday Musings right before we bounce into the new year here on Locked On Women's Basketball.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, friends. It is Monday, December 30th, 2024. I hope your holidays have been filled with too much food, too much wine, too many baked goods, and definitely not enough time with family and friends. And yes, get ready because you've got less than about 48 hours to get those resolutions for 2025 ready to go. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick, national correspondent and college basketball analyst here at The Next. Thank you so much for joining us on Locked On Women's Basketball. Your favorite podcast now has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On NBA Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now, LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On NBA Newsletter. As we reset everything in our lives for the most part on January 1, also be sure to have all of your socials up to date and those magic bookmarks. First and foremost, www.thenexthoops.com for all of our coverage of women's basketball 24/7, 365 days a year, including my weekly column that you will find there during the college basketball season. And then go and follow this podcast at Locked On WBB, and you can follow me at Missy Heidrick. We so appreciate all of you, your interactions, and for joining us and watching and listening here today. Well, don't look now, but we have survived the craziness that was the non-conference part of the 24-25 season with a couple of random games that are going to be sprinkled here and there. We now get into the meat of it and the very fun part, and that is conference play. From the Summit League to the SEC, from the Big Sky to the Big Ten and beyond, this is where it gets interesting. So today we're going to see how these top teams around the nation are and where they are and what they have been up to. We're going to take a peek into the top 25 poll. We've also got to talk about the Nets and see some of the changes for the NCAA tournament selection that we all need to keep in mind during the next 2 months as we go forward in these conference games. And then also what games you're going to need to keep your eye on as you kind of bring yourself out of 2024 and into 25. And depending on how late you stay up on New Year's Eve, well, that is going to be up to you. All right, well, let's take a look and bounce around the country, kind of give ourselves a feel of what has been happening with these top teams. We know it's a slow week and a half after we hit about the 20th, 21st, just simply because that is when everybody takes time off for the holiday and the Christmas break. But then you get back into it. Players are back on campus. There are no practice limitations. And let me just always say that if you ended and prior to your Christmas break, if you left on a loss, you're going to have coaches that have stewed. And those coaches are not going to be overly happy. So when those players come back, sometimes those practices can be brutal. My hat's off to all of those that have survived, those that came back on a winning note. That means coaches were in a much better mood. And I hope all of the presents that you found for your family and friends were exactly what you were looking for. But a slow week in women's college basketball across the country, which meant when the poll dropped today, this AP poll, this is now gives us week number 9 of the 24-25 AP poll. When it dropped, we had no movement in the top 18 slots. That doesn't happen very often. Probably going to be the only time the rest of the year we are not going to see that much movement in this AP poll. But let's take a bounce around, kind of get a feel for what some of these teams have been doing. If you haven't been paying close enough attention, or you've been distracted a bit by the holidays, maybe you're distracted by the NBA or the NFL games that were on over the weekend, or you have been just tucked into the college football playoff. We're going to talk about that in a moment too. But either way, let's see what some of these top teams across the country have been up to and what lies ahead. All right, it all starts with the UCLA Bruins. They have been number one. They have been number one for a few weeks. They are currently 13-0. They are coming off a rout of Nebraska, 91-54. It was Corey Close's 30th victory at UCLA. She's 300th victory. She's 300 and 140 in 14 seasons at UCLA. Her 300th win. Hats off to Coach Close there. This was also a win in which they saw their star center and Lauren Betts return to the lineup. She had missed 2 games because of a leg injury, but she's back. Huge win over Nebraska. She comes in with 21 points. Kiki Rice added 18. Next up for them is a game we will talk about down the road here in just a few minutes, but January 1, they play Michigan in a Big Ten matchup. South Carolina in at number 2, they are 12-1. As some would say, kind of still looking for some of that consistency, but it is there and it continues to get better. As Dawn Staley has said, there was by no means this group was going to be a finished product when the year started, and they have absolutely improving as they go forward. They are up January 2nd at Missouri in an SEC battle. That will be their first game after the new year. Notre Dame, one of this continues to turn a lot of heads, and that's exactly what is happening. And they are 11-2, ranked number 3. Their next game, a huge ACC matchup for them, January 5th. We'll mention that they are at North Carolina on the 5th. Coming in at number 4 is USC, another team from the Big Ten, one of those new teams in the Big Ten. They've been 4th. They're 11-1. And they had a win against Michigan. Juju Watkins is the first Division I player this century. Take a look at this number. First Division I player this century with 25 points, 5 assists, and 2 blocks in 3 consecutive games. We've been talking about Juju Watkins since she landed on the national landscape a year ago and continues to be one of the very best across the country. The Texas Longhorns are at 5, and since the start of the season, they are 39-1 of last season. 39-1 against unranked teams with 23 straight wins against unranked teams. However, they are going to start SEC play in style, and it is not just your average matchup. It is going to be an old school Big 12 rivalry. Their new mate in the SEC, Oklahoma, they've got to go to Norman. At Oklahoma on the 2nd of January, their first tussle. That will be a huge test for this Texas squad. In at 6 is LSU. They are 15-0, and they are undefeated. They're going to take on Arkansas on Thursday, January 2nd. Keep an eye on this LSU Tiger squad. Have they been challenged? Yes, somewhat. Maybe not as much as people would have thought they would. A pretty soft home schedule, but I think it's positioned LSU in the space that they want to be, which is understanding winning and finding ways to win games in different ways. That's one thing Kim Mulkey is going to have her team ready to go. Once you hit conference play and you keep your eyes on March, how can you figure out a way to grind out a ball game? Can you get a blowout? Do you have to come from behind? Is it one where your defense shines more than your offense, and vice versa? All of that has been part of what LSU has done so far. Keep your eyes on the Tigers. They head into SEC play at the end of this week. In at 7 is UConn. They are 11-2. Next game for them will be bright and early on New Year's Day. They play at Marquette in Big East action. Maryland, they are in at number 8. They are still undefeated, 12-0. They had a win over Michigan State, and this is the second best start in team history, better than only what they had in 2006 and 2007 season, where they started 18-0. Their first game, January 2nd, versus Rutgers. We talked about the Sooners. They're going to be hosting Texas come January 2nd. They are 12-1. They are the 9th ranked team in the country. And I really like this Oklahoma squad. Just remember that Jenny Baranczyk had over 96% of her scoring and a rebounding returning from a year ago. And then what did she do? She added an All-American center inside and Reagan Beers, who transferred from Oregon State. Do not sleep on the Sooners. I don't know if people in the SEC are, but I'm telling you right now, do not sleep on the Sooners. In at number 10, Ohio State, they continue to sit there at undefeated at 13-0. Again, maybe a bit of a softer schedule for the Buckeyes. They still trying to figure out who they are without the likes of J.C. Sheldon or Celeste Taylor in their backcourt. It looks very different if you're Ohio State, but they have 5 players that are averaging double digits in scoring. You got to love balance. That's what makes them the number 10 team in the country. In at number 11 is the first team from the Big 12 in the top 25. That is the TCU Horned Frogs. They are 13-1. Their only loss coming when they were decimated by South Carolina at home. But I think there's balance to this TCU squad, and they will be tested as Big 12 play ramps up now. Only one Big 12 game was played prior to the Christmas holiday. Everything kicks off now starting tomorrow on New Year's Eve and beyond. And then right behind them at 12 is Kansas State. They were previously ranked 12. They are 13-1. Their only loss this season to Duke on a neutral court. They really played only one true road game. That was at Texas A&M when they completely destroyed the Aggies in College Station. They opened up with a decisive Big 12 win over Cincinnati. But here's an interesting tidbit I took from another wonderful colleague out there. The Wildcats do not play another ranked opponent as it sits today until February. Keep that in mind. That could very well position this Kansas State squad as they move forward. They will have their first game of 2025 be on New Year's Day at Houston in Big 12 play. Georgia Tech is in at 13. Duke is in at 14. Tennessee still undefeated at 12-0. And as everyone, they have taken sort of college basketball by storm. This new system, Kim Caldwell, what she's done in her first year, but the Lady Vols 12-0, they will be at Texas A&M to open 2025 on January 2nd. All right, when we come back, we've got to talk. Not even though school is not necessarily in session, people are still on their winter breaks. We got to drill down. So we're going to test and be ready with all things that you need to know about net rankings, and then some of the changes that are coming down the pipe for us come Selection Sunday in March that we all need to be prepared for. Well, today's episode is brought to you by Rocket RX. For all of the men that are out there listening, if you are ready to boost your confidence and take control, Rocket RX has the solution. Imagine feeling more prepared and being at your best. Rocket RX makes it simple and stress-free. Rocket RX offers FDA-approved treatments for ED at a lower cost than branded alternatives. No more uncomfortable doctor visits or pharmacy trips. Everything is delivered straight to your door in discreet, plain packaging. With Rocket RX, you'll get trusted care from a real U.S. clinical team. Complete a quick 100% online consultation, and you could get your free prescription today. So visit rocketrx.com to get started now. It only takes 2 minutes. Right now, our listeners can get 40% off your first order when you use the code LOCKEDONNBA, all uppercase. That's rocketrx.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for 40% off your first order. Terms and conditions apply. Rocket RX, made simple. Hi, everybody. I am Missy Heidrick, national correspondent at The Next and analyst in college basketball world. And so thank you for joining us today here on Locked On Women's Basketball, where you're listening, where you're watching. And as we head into 2025, I always think about what do we have to do to be prepared, because we've all just been wandering aimlessly as we kind of go through the non-conference schedule. So many games, so many different matchups, so many different locations. Some of them are at home. Some of them are true road games. Some of them are neutral sites, whether that's Las Vegas or the Bahamas or Palm Springs or Florida, you name it, we have seen it. But the best part of once we hit 2025 and you roll into January is that we know most everything we see outside of a couple sprinkled here or there are going to be conference games. This is where the rubber meets the road. I always tell people when you're in conference play, it's very simple. You've got to hold home court and you got to steal a few on the road. The rest is all you can do. You've got to take care of your own business. We all and every team controls their own destiny. Well, one of the things I think is interesting, we talked about this and we've done it, I think, in the past couple of years, is we've drilled down to remember and kind of let everybody understand what the net is, because this is going to be a huge topic of conversation for everybody as we go into the conference season. Everyone's going to want to talk about what's your net ranking, where are you, what does it mean? Well, ultimately, I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version, because I think this is the way that I like to look at it, that the net ranking is determined by who you played, where you played, how efficiently you played, and the result of the game. Keep in mind that NET stands for NCAA Evaluation Tool. And in women's basketball, it's a sorting tool used to measure a team's quality and helps evaluate teams' resumes for selection and seeding in the NCAA tournament. We don't necessarily use the RPI. You're going to hear a lot about strength and schedule, which is a formula. that was something that was based on just winning percentage. That's not necessarily something we use in terms of RPI. But the net ranking and the net number that a team has behind its name is just one of a host of criteria that the NCAA Women's Basketball Division I Selection Committee utilizes to put together their field of 68. So net is going to be a big process. You can go and you can see that number. It updates on a daily basis. So whatever your team's net number was on, let's say, December 1st, it's not going to be the same on February 15th. It'll be different, and it won't be the same on March 1st, and it will not be the same right after your conference tournament. That is all factored in. But because of that, I want to bring kind of to light so everybody has a little bit more understanding, I think, of some of the things that the NCAA Selection Committee voted on over the summer that I think will be very helpful as we think about putting together a field of 68. Okay, there were a couple things that they made in their announcement. They had their joint meetings this summer, and for the NCAA Division I Women's Basketball Selection Committee, there's a couple things you're going to see. First and foremost, on Selection Sunday, the committee will provide publicly for the first time the entire 68 team seed list in seed order when the bracket is announced. So it won't bounce. You'll go one through, that's how it's going to roll. I think that's going to be really efficient, and it's going to put all of it kind of out on the table for everyone to see how the committee got to where they are. But they also, I think this is going to be tied to net, and I think this is a really interesting wrinkle now that we would see. For those of you that follow men's college basketball, you've always heard about quad wins, that has been a factor. That's been a big piece of that selection process. Now, quadrant wins are also going to be part of the team sheets for the 2024-25 season in women's basketball. Women's basketball home, away, neutral quadrant ranges are based on an analysis of data going back to 2010. And the quadrant ranges are unique to women's basketball data. We're going to talk about quad wins on the men's side, and we're going to talk about quad wins in the women. They're just a little bit different. So for the 2024-25 season, the net rank quad ranges for women's basketball were based on the expected winning percentage versus a given opponent rank with respect to game location across all games. So the ranges are classified as quadrant 1. That's a home game 1 through 25, neutral 1 to 35, and away 1 to 45. A quad 2, home 26 to 55, neutral 36 to 55, and away 46 to 80. Quadrant 3, home 56 to 90, neutral is 66 to 105, and the away is 81 to 130. And a quad 4 is a home 91 plus, neutral 106 plus, and away 131 plus. So what does this really mean? Well, that means when the selection committee is looking to fill out their field of 68 and they have those team sheets, there will be a number next to that. Quadrant 1 wins, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quad 4. And that is going to help. It's going to help those top teams, the top tier teams, as they figure out those seedings, because we all know in women's basketball, everyone is jonesing for number 1 through 16, because that means you are going to host at those home sites. You want to be a top 4 seed in each region. On the flip side, I think it's most definitely going to impact whether someone might go from a 10 to a 12 seed in an at-large situation. It could be a 7 to a 9 in an at-large. But it's also going to make a difference, especially when we talk about those last 4 in. And we think about the quote-unquote play-in games or the round 1 games, as I call them playing games, but I think technically called round 1, but that's how it's usually defined. We have to think about that would be probably a very good measuring tool, is you're going to look at the number of quad 1 wins for one team versus another, or how many quad 2 wins that they have versus another. And also you have to think about those losses, wins and losses. They are going to be indicative because it's going to be about who you played and where you played them and the efficiency of which you did that. Those numbers will come into play. And so for all fans out there, whatever your team is, whether it's South Dakota State out of the Summit League, and you are probably thinking that more than likely they're going to get that automatic qualifier, but what if that wasn't the case? Well, they're going to want to know what those quad wins are going to be and what that looks like, how they played those teams, where they played those teams, and what the outcome was. I would look at a borderline Big 10 or a borderline Big 12 team and say, well, their quad win number, their quad totals are going to be a big factor in whether or not they bounce into the tournament or they are on the outside looking in. So remember, net is super simple. I like to keep it simple. It's who you played, where you played, how efficiently you played, and the result of the game. Wins, always way better than a loss, but might be a 2-point loss on the road to another team that's considered a quad one loss. Not necessarily as bad. Win would be better, but sometimes the losses aren't going to hit you as hard. Net numbers, they reset on a daily basis. What they look like today, they will not look at the end of March. So don't have a panic attack. Everybody stay calm, stay as neutral as you can, but understand from now on, every game is going to have even bigger stakes. We have reached the second portion of the calendar of this, and I think really of the season. Part 1 is non-con, part 2 is conference, and part 3 is when we get to the conference tournament. We have to set ourselves up for March. This does that, no doubt about it. All right. When we come back, we are going to talk a little bit more about what games you need to be watching over the next week or so. It still is a holiday break. We're all still bundled up at home. You might have to take down some decorations around your house. Send your spouse or your significant other, your kids outside to make sure they get the lights off the trees. Either way, we've got business to take care of at home and on the floor. We'll talk about it in just a moment. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick, and welcome back to Locked On Women's Basketball. Thank you for watching and for listening and for joining us here today. I was just talking about net rankings. We were just talking about how there are formulas put together. Hats off to both, I have always said, to the men's and women's basketball committees for putting together, I think, what is a system that is based on metrics, that is based on numbers. Something that I would hope in the future the fellow brethren at the college football playoff will do. For those of you that still have a team alive, congratulations. They started with 12 in the college football playoff, but now we are down to 8. There is a game on New Year's Eve and then 3 games on New Year's Day to see who is going to be into the semifinals and then eventually make themselves into the national championship. A lot of hand-wringing, a lot of consternation all across the country from fans, from pundits about who was in and who was out. But I think if there's one thing that you can take away from the craziness and the most wonderful time of year, which we love to call March Madness and the NCAA tournament, is that there is a formula. There are some numbers that are taken into account, whether it's net, whether you're talking about strength of schedule, whether you're talking and taking into some things that might be, quote unquote, an eye test, how a team has played over the course of their last 10 games of the regular season, or did they lose a key player to injury down the stretch that may or may not return for the tournament. Sometimes that information is given to us, sometimes not. Think 2 years ago when Olivia Miles goes down in the ACC tournament, Notre Dame did not make a statement. They didn't have to, but it still left you with the wonder of whether or not that team would be as good and how good could they be in the tournament without her. I think college football is going to have to go to something like this. It's just my opinion, 100% solely only mine. But as a huge college football fan and a fan of all college sports in general, I think there has to be some sort of metric. You have to be able to showcase what that looks like. Eye tests are fantastic and something that we think, or did they play themselves in? Well, sometimes you've got to play yourself in, and it might not just be one game. There's a difference there. And we have seen, and has been happening for decades, that one loss in college football could be the end of you chasing a national championship, no doubt about it. That doesn't necessarily happen in college basketball, but you have to really work hard to put yourself back into the field and back into the tournament. Once you're in that bracket, then all bets are off. That's how I look at it. But you've got to figure out a way to put together a system based on numbers and metrics and formulas that can help you do that. So that's my little bit of advice for all of the college football folks out there, whether they take it or not. Well, more than likely they won't, but it still is making for great games all across the country. And to your team still alive, best of luck. It's going to be fun. Now, If you are going to be sitting at home on New Year's Day and you're thinking, what am I going to be doing? Well, let me just tell you, folks, there is plenty of college women's basketball that you are going to want to keep your eyes on. All right, let's talk about the Big Ten, because I think this is a loaded, stacked conference right now. You've got the likes of UCLA and USC, Maryland, Ohio State, Michigan State, all of these teams running up and down the top 25. Iowa is in, Michigan at 24, Michigan at 17. You've got, as I mentioned, Ohio State in at 10. We talked about some of those games that lie ahead for them. But this is what happens starting New Year's Eve. Tomorrow, 12:31, Washington will be at Illinois. Illinois has been in the top 25 so far this season. They are still receiving votes. They had 11 in the AP poll today. Oregon at Northwestern, Minnesota at Wisconsin. Some of these all are going to be teams that are going to be hunting and searching for at-large bids when it comes to Selection Sunday. Their net and their results will be key. Then you turn the tables to 2025. You flip the switch and flip the calendar. Iowa at Penn State, Purdue at Michigan State, Nebraska at USC, and a big one to circle, Michigan at UCLA. I think that Nebraska at USC game, very interesting. Can the Cornhuskers bounce back? They have been really good at pieces of this season. They have struggled now without Natalie Potts. She's out for the season, one of their outstanding sophomores. They are without her. I think it's a struggle to fill that void. But can they bounce back at USC, and what will be their answer for Juju Watkins? Keep your eyes on that game on the 1st. Rutgers will be at Maryland on the 2nd, and UCLA then will play at Indiana on the 4th. So a busy week coming up in the Big Ten. Keep your eyes on it, folks. Keep your eyes. Then we got to turn the page and think about what happens over in the ACC. Now, we know that we've got teams from both coasts in all of these leagues, so we no longer can just kind of do it based on geography. You're going to have to jump from one time zone to the other, and you've got to pay attention. That's all I'm telling you right now. But if you are sitting around on Thursday the 2nd, there are going to be a host of games you want to watch. Florida State at Virginia Tech, Wake Forest at Virginia. Duke has to go. They go on the road to play at Boston College. You've got Miami at Louisville. Cal, who has jumped themselves into the top 25, up one spot into number 20 this week. They are going to be at Clemson. Syracuse at Georgia Tech. Stanford at SMU. And then you turn the page to Sunday, the 5th. We already mentioned that big game for Notre Dame where they will travel to North Carolina on Sunday, the 5th. But you also have Pitt going to Duke. Virginia Tech at Miami. Boston College will take on NC State. This is an NC State squad still hanging on in the top 25. They didn't move in at number 22. There's a lot of pieces of the puzzle there I find interesting for the Wolfpack. And can they get on a winning streak? Can they kind of put together a few wins in a row? I think that's what you want to see from them at the start of ACC play. Stanford at Clemson, Syracuse at Florida State, Louisville on the road at Wake Forest. Again, we talk about it all the time. I said it at the top. You got to win at home and hold home court, and you got to steal a couple on the road. Who in the ACC can steal one early? That is a big question mark. And then let's not forget our friends over in the Big 12. There's some games that I do want you to keep your eye on. The first will be Tuesday, tomorrow, New Year's Eve, Utah at Arizona. Former Pac-12 foes, now Big 12 foes, the corner schools. They are there. I think Utah, Arizona has all of the makings for a very interesting matchup. Then on Wednesday, January 1st, happy 2025, a host of Big 12 games to keep your eyes on. BYU at Cincinnati, UCF at number 18, West Virginia, Kansas at Iowa State. That will be very interesting. The Cyclones dropped their first game of the Big 12 season at Oklahoma State. The Cowgirls are 11-1 on the year, 1-0 in league play. They are receiving votes, but can Kansas get a road win? Iowa State desperate to hold home court, I think, to open 2025. You've got Kansas State on the road at Houston, Oklahoma State, as we said, also receiving votes. They are at Baylor, Texas Tech at Arizona State. Colorado then will travel to Fort Worth and take on TCU. A host of games, great matchups. I know we didn't mention a lot about the SEC, but a couple to keep your eyes on, as I said earlier. LSU, they are in South Carolina. You've got the Texas at Oklahoma matchup on the 2nd. I would circle those along with those ACC games you want to see as well. Well, everybody, I know we've gotten to the end of 2024 here almost. It's just 30th. It's Monday. Mondays are crazy. They're crazy for everyone. We're coming off the holiday breaks. Some have to go back to work this week. Some don't. School will start again at the beginning of next. But all it really truly means is that we are very thankful. So thankful that you spend time with us all throughout the year in 2024, whether it's listening to us talk about the college game or the W, or a host of amazing stories and people that come to you all the time here on Locked On Women's Basketball. We are incredibly, incredibly grateful. So thank you for joining today and every day that you tune in and listen and watch. Well, you can find me at Missy Heidrick on X, or formerly known as Twitter. Please follow me. As we said, reset all those socials come January 1. Get yourself in line. Go follow this podcast at Locked On WBB, and then please come see me and all of my much more amazing colleagues who are 10 times better than I am over at thenexthoops.com. We are there to be able to share the stories, to tell the stories, and to be able to elevate women's basketball all across the country and in the international space. We do it each and every day, and we truly, truly do appreciate all of you. Well, with that said, thank you for joining us here today. And just remember that your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On NBA Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. And start your day with the all-new free Locked On NBA newsletter. Thank you, everybody. Have a fabulous New Year's Eve and a New Year's Day, and kick in 2025 with some fantastic college basketball. We will see you on the flip side next year. Join us right back here all this week.